I always like that announcement. Recording in progress. Very official. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Ilsa May. I'm a career and outreach coordinator within the Econ Career Development Office. And tonight we have two amazing alums joining us from kind of diverse industries. And I want to thank everybody, both the alums for coming, as well as the students for taking time out of your evening to learn about some of what our amazing alums end up doing, as well as sharing some of their career advice. So for you current students, you can learn from their wisdom, maybe learn from their successes, as well as maybe learn from some of their mistakes. So we're also joined by Elizabeth Foste, who's the other career advisor within the Econ Career Development Office. Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to wave or say hello quickly.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. If you have questions about things that are discussed tonight, please make a career advising appointment. We'd love to talk with you.
And we'll chat a little bit more later, kind of how you can do that. I can share that information in the chat. So just to give you a little bit of kind of context of how this is going to go tonight, we have our two amazing alums. We're going to have them introduce themselves. And then throughout this conversation, there's going to be two opportunities for you all to ask questions. So if anything they say while they're talking, if you have a question or about, feel free to throw it in the chat, and then we'll kind of moderate and go through those when we have that time for Q&A. So just know if you have some burning questions for either or both of them, be prepared to engage. Also, if you want to turn your camera on, if you're able to and comfortable with that, it's great to be able to see faces live, interacting. So even if you're eating your dinner or anything like that, perfectly okay. We just want to have this be a learning opportunity and make sure that you're all able to be present. So we will kick things off. The first question that I have for both of our alums here is just generally to introduce themselves. So name, when you graduated and what you studied, so any majors or certificates. Did you have an internship in college? If so, where? And kind of what you're doing now. So where you're at now and what you generally do in your role. So that's a lot of things. I'll remind you if you don't hit on all of them. But let's start with Keith. If you could please kind of introduce yourself and give us some of the information about when you were here at UW and then kind of what you're up to now.
Sure. And first of all, thanks for having me. This is a great opportunity. I'm excited to be here. My name is Keith Browning. I graduated in 1989 with the Bachelor of Arts in Economics. I did not have an internship in college. I actually was fortunate enough to play for the Badger football team. And so, you know, most of us have aspirations of going pro. So that was sort of my focus in training and gearing up to either be drafted or signed as a free agent after college is what I'd been working on. So even though I was, working on my degree, I really didn't have any internships other than a few summer jobs, around town, but nothing that really would prepare me for what I consider my career or the work world. I am currently a managing director at Delta Airlines. They're headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. I commute between Atlanta and Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been in supply chain now for about 15 years of my career. And so my current role is overseeing the supply chain management organization at Delta for what we call indirect spend. And most of that is what we call corporate services, so our back office functions such as HR, finance, legal, real estate. I buy a lot of like our employee benefits and things that impact our employees, uniforms for our flight attendants and pilots. For the finance team, is the investor relations and working with those organizations and the analysts. I also oversee now that because of the pandemic, PPE. We've been sourcing, procuring a lot of those products, hand sanitizer and gloves and things of that sort over the last year and a half. And then I have some customer facing groups such as marketing and sales. If you ever fly in Delta and watch our movies or TV shows, in-flight entertainment, as well as our customer success organization. And the other group I have is supplier diversity. And that group is tasked with finding diverse suppliers, minority owned, women-owned, LGBTQ, veteran-owned, and disability-owned companies that we can work with and help grow spend with those type of organizations.
You have a lot on your plate.
I do.
We're good. Yeah. good job. Job retention, right? Or job security.
So far.
Elena, do you want to share a little bit about your background and what you're up to now?
Yes, definitely. And thank you again, everyone. I'm very excited to be here and share a little bit about who I am and how I've gotten to where I am today. So my name's Elena Ralseth. I graduated in 2019. I double majored in economics and international studies. And I also got a certificate in development economics. I had a few internships in college. My first one was actually with the Department of Workforce Development for the state of Wisconsin. And then I kind of switched to insurance where I am today. I had an internship for Swiss Re in Washington, DC. And then I found out about Aon, the current company that I'm at, through that internship. So my current position, I'm a property broker in the property group at Aon in New York City. My kind of responsibility and role is I oversee a book of accounts, about 20 clients. Our clients are Fortune 500 clients, and we are the middleman in between the clients and the underwriters who actually take on the risk. So I help the client place their insurance program for them. Since we deal with very high value clients, there's a lot that goes into placing these insurance programs, negotiating with the underwriters, building relationships with the clients and the underwriters. So it's a lot of people skills, managing a book, and then at the same time, there is some technical aspects of being a broker. So yeah, just a little bit about me.
Great, thanks so much, Elena. So I'll go back to Keith on this next question. So when did you know what you wanted to do after graduation, and how did you figure it out? So it sounded like maybe you didn't exactly have that career trajectory figured out, from an industry standpoint because you were a football player. So kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, I really didn't know coming out of college what I wanted to do, other than, again, my sights were, playing professional football. But, I also know the chances of that are pretty low because, coming from high school to college to NFL, the chances of continuing on gets lower and lower. So I knew I had to get my degree, and I did focus on getting my degree while I was at Wisconsin. But I had no idea at the time, what I was going to do. And so after I did have a couple years in NFL, but after, my career was over, I really relied on my network to help me sort of figure out what I wanted to do next. And my first job was actually in finance as a financial analyst at Oscar Mayer Foods when their headquarters were in Madison. And I got that job through networking and just reaching out to my network and mentors, people that I met at the university. And there were some folks who had worked at Oscar Mayer that actually had worked in the athletic department at Wisconsin. And, they said, hey, go talk to this person and see what kind of roles they have. And so when I went and talked to one of the leaders at Oscar Mayer, and they put me in touch with, someone in the finance organization who had a need for a financial analyst. And, so I met with them, after I sent my resume in and ended up getting a job. I was fortunate enough. And I was there for about 3 years. And I stayed with finance, for a few roles, but it really was 10 years into my career when I figured out what I wanted to do. About that time, it was the year 2000, and some of you probably don't remember this, but there was a lot of challenges around technology at that time, and just if things were going to work, because most computer programs had not accounted for the switch over to the year 2000. And at that time, I was actually a financial analyst at Pillsbury company here in Minneapolis. And I was doing the budgeting for the IT organization. And in working with IT, I started actually building my own computers and had a friend who was building computers, and I was going to buy one. He's like, why would you buy one? You can build it. And I was like, well, I'm not going to build it. I don't know how to. And he ended up teaching me how to do that. And through that personal hobby, I realized I really liked technology, wanted to go into IT. And at the time I was doing the forecasting for the IT budgets for all of their projects. And I thought about continuing with Pillsbury, but at the time they were being about to be sold, and they were sold to General Mills. And while they were in that process, though, it was a little uncertain around the job market at the company. I ended up interviewing for IT project manager role at Best Buy. I think you're all familiar with Best Buy. Their headquarters are here in Minneapolis. And so I ended up being a project manager And I did that for about 8 years. And about 8 years in, I ended up implementing a system for a sourcing and procurement solution that Best Buy was putting in. And that enabled me to move into supply chain. There was an opportunity at Target, a little higher level position and more money. And so I interviewed for that role. And once I got into supply chain and I was actually sourcing IT hardware, software, and consulting services for Target. And from that role, I ended up really enjoying being in supply chain and sourcing procurement. I got to work with all areas of the company. Before I was implementing systems and making it easier for our employees or customers, to use different components related to those that Best Buy. But when I went into supply chain, we impacted the bottom line because we were procuring products and services and negotiating those contracts. We knew that, by negotiating better pricing, we were impacting the bottom line. And that was something, from a results perspective, that was very appealing to me. So I've been, like I say, I started my career in finance, knew about 10 years in that I really liked IT and technology, was able to do that for about 8 years. And then from there, I went into supply chain, and I've been in supply chain ever since. And part of my job is related to IT because I have done some IT sourcing over the years, but I enjoy really working with all the stakeholders in the company, working with our CEO, working with the board of directors, working with suppliers. Some of these suppliers have become friends of mine, and it's been a very rewarding career in supply chain. And so, it was 10 years in, and then another 8 years in before I really got into something that I found was rewarding and that I really enjoy doing.
That's awesome. I think that that's probably, or I hope, powerful for some of the students on the call too, because I think there's a lot of pressure for them to have it all figured out. They're a sophomore and they're like, oh, I don't know what I want to do when I graduate. Or I'm meeting with seniors like, I don't know what I want to do for the rest of my life. And it's like, hey, you'll figure out a lot of things as you kind of go and you try things out.
Yeah, I mean, if you do, it's great. There's nothing wrong. I've had a friend I've been friends with since college, and she knew she wanted to go into orthopedic surgery, and she did that, and she got a degree and graduated, and she's still doing that to the day. But you don't actually, I'm a proponent of, you don't have to know. If you don't know, don't worry about it. You'll figure things out. And as you get into, once you do find a job, you end up liking it or you don't like it. If you don't like it, you figure something else out. And if you do like it, you stay with it. So I definitely was one of the people that I had no clue as to what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I think that that's a little bit more of the more common than other students kind of think, because I think we look to the left, look to the right. Oh my gosh, everybody else has it figured out. And so I tell them and advise them, no, they don't. They kind of sometimes say they do, but they're still figuring out life just like all of us are.
Yep. And even the people who think they have figured out, they get into it once they start working and they don't end up not liking it. They do something else too. So, I would say very rarely do people stay with what they started with once they come out of college.
Awesome. Thanks. So Elena, kind of going over to you with this kind of similar question. How did you know, or when did you know what you wanted to do after graduation, and how did you figure it out? Because you're at the same company that you started at graduation, but you've changed roles slightly, right? Within the last.
Yeah, I was recently promoted in the past few months.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So it's very exciting. Even then, it's my responsibilities. I mean, they've changed. I've really noticed it in the past month. But I think everything that I've been doing for the past year has prepared me to be promoted. And I have a very supportive team. So I think that's what helped me. But besides the point, recently I was in your guys' shoes of not knowing what to do after I graduated. And I was one who I wanted everything to be figured out. And so I was always looking for like the next internship or what I could apply to. I applied to a lot of jobs. And I started off with that internship at the Department of Workforce Development, which I actually found through the Econ department. I remember it was like a flyer that you guys had in the office. Because originally I thought, being an econ major, that I wanted to go into public service, and kind of I wanted to do the whole like Federal Reserve kind of internship, and more so really focused on economics. So that's why I chose that internship. But once I did that, it taught me a lot, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But I'm really glad I made those connections through that internship. and had that experience to prepare me for my second internship was after my junior year of college, or that summer after my junior year. So I actually went to the career fair, determined to find an internship for that summer. So I highly recommend the career fair. Come with your resume, give it out to as many people as you can that are companies that you researched beforehand and are interested in. I was a double major in international studies, so I found any type of career that was international to be interesting to me. So I basically looked at all the companies that were going to the career fair, and I saw this one company, Swiss Re. I saw the word Swiss. I was like, oh, but they're probably headquartered in Switzerland. That sounds like something I would be interested in. And so I made a point to stop at their booth, and they were an insurance company. They're an underwriting company. I didn't know anything about them, but I had a really good conversation with the representative there. And he's like, I think you would be great for this role. Go ahead and apply and see where it lands. So I applied for the internship, and I was very open to my location. I didn't necessarily need to be I'm from Minnesota. I didn't need to be in Minneapolis or in Wisconsin or Chicago. I would go anywhere. So I ended up in Washington, D.C., and that was a public sector internship through Swiss Re. So our clients were like the World Bank and the IMF. And so that part of it really intrigued me because of what we learn in all of our economics classes. And basically what we were trying to do is we were selling, and this is kind of getting very high level, but something called a parametric solution. And I'm sure everyone is aware of global warming and what's happening with all of these natural catastrophes. And that is affecting the insurance industry directly, and people that need these payouts to rebuild their houses, rebuild their companies, and their properties. And so this parametric solution basically gave a payout right away. There was all these metrics that it would have to hit. So then it closes the gap in between when the event happens and when they get the payout, so they can recover quicker. And so that's basically was the product that we were selling in my group, but we were selling it to government entities like the World Bank, the IMF. I think we did a deal with like the coral reef in the Gulf of Mexico. So the representatives were from the country of Mexico. And so that as a whole sparked my interest in what insurance can do overall. And I was never exposed to that world. Being an econ major, we actually have a great risk management program at Wisconsin, but I had no idea about it because I never took a risk management course. But there's so much you can do with your econ major. And I had no idea that what I was learning in my classes applied to this in a like very general aspect. But the fact that I was exposed to this industry that was so interesting and relevant to today with everything that's happening, especially last year with, you think about COVID and all of the riots that happened, all of these are losses that affect the insurance industry. And I don't think it's a very secure industry because, and also when COVID happened, a lot of people lost their jobs. Brokers aren't going anywhere. The insurance industry isn't going anywhere. The clients need us to represent them. And so anyways, I'm kind of digressing, but that's how I got interested in insurance, was through Swiss Re. I found out about Aon because Aon is a broker that worked with Swiss Re on some deals. And I tried to get a job through Swiss Re. It was very, very competitive. I had to interview, I had to apply. They had like a 2-year graduate program where you go to Switzerland for 5 months, very intriguing. And you kind of do like a rotational, so you figure out exactly what you're interested in the company. I ended up not getting the job, which I was pretty disappointed in, but my group was extremely supportive. I made tons of connections. I made it a point to really network the whole time that I was there. And I met someone actually at Aon that went to Wisconsin, like the last day that I had on my internship, and I made it a point to stay connected with him. And then I saw him when we did one of those trips to Chicago through ESA. We did the career trips, and we connected with him. I gave him my resume, and it kind of went from there. And I found a job in New York and I applied for it. And so I would say I just landed in this industry because of my internship experience. And I ended up really liking it. But to Keith's point, some people might not like it after being in a year. And that's the great part about being at big companies like Delta and like Aon, is they're very, very open to you transferring inside the company. There's an immense amount of opportunities. I don't have to stay in property forever. And not only that, I'm meeting clients and I'm meeting underwriters at all these other companies that I'm making connections that I could easily transfer my skills.
Excellent. That was a really great segue to, making connections and then how your network can influence, because I know Keith alluded to that earlier of that, and Keith, I didn't know that you actually were in the NFL for a while. What team were you playing for?
So with the Cowboys for a couple of years.
Cowboys. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Because I was going to ask, like, oh, if you did go to the NFL, what team would you want to play for? And then you mentioned that you did. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. I did not know that. I knew you were a Badger football player. So let's talk a little bit about networking, because that's something that one of the Thomas put in the chat. And Keith, we can kind of start with you. What advice would you give when it comes to building your network? So you're a little bit more, mid-level senior in your career. And so I'm sure too, there's interactions that you have with potential interns, potential new hires. What are things that, I guess, tips, positive things they can do and things to avoid when students are maybe reaching out to you for networking?
Sure. I didn't realize how important networking was in the business world when I first started, but like in real estate, it's location, location, location. I would say in the job world, it's networking, networking, networking. When I think back on my career, every job, except for the last two, everything up until then, I've gotten through networking. And it was from someone I knew, whether it was an acquaintance, a family friend, and I would say, look within your family and, at what roles, what jobs people have and if there's a company you're interested in, working at. One of the things I was told, where do you spend your money? Is to start with companies, whether it's, food, restaurants, retail, entertainment, travel, where do you spend your money and then look at those type of companies first. But look in your family, look at your friends' relatives, what companies do they work at? And so I didn't have some of the opportunities I think that you all have today, within the university as far as internships. And we had companies that we had a career day and companies would come through and interview you, for positions and possibly for internships. But it was really, like I said, my first job was I reached out to someone that I knew through athletics. And they said, hey, why don't you go talk to this person who works at Oscar Mayer Foods? And I went and talked to them, and that helped me get my first job. And then after that, every job after that was through someone I knew. I would reach out to someone and say, here's what I do, or here's what I'm interested in doing. And, and people are normally willing to help you if you ask. So again, up until the last two, every job I've had is through networking. And today I would say from an advice standpoint is, look at your inner network of, family and friends. And then I would say, if you're not on LinkedIn yet, I would build a profile on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is, and I'm familiar with it. I've been using it for years. The last two jobs I've gotten at Carnival Cruise Line down in Miami and at Delta, the recruiters found my profile on LinkedIn. But before that, and that was sort of a cold call where they reached out to me asking if I was interested in, a potential job with their companies. But before that was just for people I knew and people reaching out to me, say, hey, I've got this opportunity. I think you'd be a good fit for it. But that was after I'd been in the workforce for a while and got to know people that I met, that I work with in my company or that I met at other companies. But until you can establish yourself, I would just say, use your network of friends and relatives, get on LinkedIn. And if you're looking at a company, for this Delta or Aon, and they tell you if there's alumni from that company, working there, and reach out to those folks if you're interested in that company or that type of career. And I think it will be beneficial to you. And don't be shy about it. You don't want that person to do all the work. You want to make sure you're doing the work and say, hey, I'm a Wisconsin, student looking for some advice. Are you willing to help me? And I would say, some people don't respond, so don't get disappointed if you don't hear back. But I would say 8 to 9 out of 10 people are going to respond to you and be willing to, to connect with you and help you out.
That was beautiful, Keith. Those are, you're saying things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I say this to students a lot in my appointments. And so it just validates that hopefully I'm giving decent advice, right?
Great.
Elena, what do you have to say kind of about networking? Like even what is networking? Kind of thinking back when you were a student, maybe getting started networking, there's that like, well, what is it even? What's the goal of it? And then how do you even
Yeah.
start making connections?
Definitely. And I would say I wasn't really sure where to start because in my family, they're not doing anything that I wanted to do and necessarily like close friends. So they would be great resources if I had other interests, but I didn't. So I kind of struggled. And especially in the insurance industry, I was shocked when I came here how many people got their job from knowing someone in the industry. It's a wide web of networking spread out there. And that's also a reason why I'm here, is because I want to spread the word about the insurance industry and to students in economics that you can come here. You don't have to be a risk management major. But when I was starting to network and when I kind of pushed myself at the career fair to talk to people, and that was outside of my comfort zone, and it's not comfortable, but you kind of just have to do it for 5 minutes, and that's all it takes. And all you have to do is put your face to their face and like have a conversation, and give them your resume and they'll remember you. But when I was at Swiss Re, what I remember doing is I was setting up coffee chats for like 20 minutes with people that weren't necessarily in my group. They were across all groups in Swiss Re, just so I could get my name out there, so I could kind of, because I wasn't sure, I was in the insurance industry, but it was so wide and deep. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to specify in. And I didn't land in there's a lot of like rotational programs when you first graduate with those kind of jobs. I didn't have that at Aon, so I was kind of nervous. Like, what if I don't like broking? This is all I have. So that's why I really spread a wide net at Swiss Re. So I just reached out to people, say, do you have 20 minutes? Just grab a coffee with me. I just want to hear about your background, how you got to Swiss Re, and if you have any advice for me as a student who's going to graduate in about a year. And I had great conversations with people. I learned a lot. They gave me a lot of advice. And setting up those chats doesn't mean that like you're obligated to, they're not obligated to like get you an interview or anything. It's literally just to meet people and have conversations and expand your knowledge about the company and what I found most helpful is how they got there. That's what I wanted to know, is how did you get your job here? How do I get to where you are? And I found that extremely helpful. And with jobs, yeah, career fair, I think that was the number one thing for me. And utilize Ilsa and Elizabeth, they're great, and utilize the clubs that the economics department has to offer. I think that was huge for me in networking, because I was involved in ESA and I met a lot of alumni through that. And if I didn't end up at Aon, I would have reached out to them to try and see kind of if they had any openings or time to chat.
Great, thank you both. We talk about the importance of networking so much in career advising, and I think that even as Keith was saying before, year 2000 technology was kind of different. There was a lot of fear. I remember it turning year 2000, and I was like, oh my gosh, are the lights going to go off? Is the whole world going to end? There's all of this like kind of intrigue there. But kind of one of the things that stands the test of time is networking, right? It's those personal connections. It doesn't have to be someone in some really high position, but it can be someone you meet in a student org, someone you have a class with, right? It could be, eventually those people are going to be your colleagues. Right now they're your peers, maybe in a class or student org, but eventually they might be able to refer you for a job or vice versa. So just thinking that I think of it like planting seeds. It's that the seed doesn't grow overnight, but eventually there might be something there that you can kind of tend to and pay attention to. So one question that another student posed was kind of how do you figure out what you want to do? So there's, I know we talked a little bit about how you guys kind of fell into things or networked with people, but what were some of the really impactful things that you did while you were in school, or opportunities you had that helped you figure out, okay, this is what's important for my next step? And how does someone kind of evaluate that for themselves? Keith, do you want to start with that?
Sure. When I was in school, like I said, I actually started off as an electrical and computer engineering major. And that was mainly because of these aptitude tests that I took in high school, and it sort of guided me towards that. And I chose that career, or at least that curriculum in college. And after really the first semester, it really didn't hold my interest. And then how I knew it probably wasn't the career for me was when I was going out down to, I think most of you know, the KK. And as I'm passing the engineering library, all of my classmates are in there and I'm going out. So I'm like, this might not be the right major for me if I need to study all the time. And don't get me wrong, you need to study. So, I'm not saying don't study, but it just didn't hold my interest. And so as I was going through the booklet that list all the different majors, the reason I chose economics was when I was reading the description, the word money was mentioned. And that was all I needed to say. Well, I like money. And so I ended up majoring in economics. I actually got a minor in computer science, but that sort of started me on my path. And at the time, I really didn't know what area I wanted to go into. It was, finance, banking, investments, sort of piqued my interest. But really, it wasn't until I got into the workforce, that started try to figure out what I wanted to do. But I also wasn't afraid to try different things. I've been in finance. I've been in human resources. I've been in, IT technology, and now, I've been in supply chain management. So I've been in, 4 different business units throughout my career. But and I've learned something from each of them that's helped me get to where I am. But I would say, the advice that I have 2 daughters, and what I've told them is, what are you passionate about? And I would say start there, because I think having a career, having a job is so much easier when you have a passion for it. And so if you can make money from whatever it is you have a passion for, that's great. Now, not everything you can make money from, but I would say at least start thinking about that. And then if that isn't a potential option for you, maybe right away, then, again, look at, the things that interest you, the things you spend money on. I've been in retail. I love electronics, and, Best Buy was a company I thoroughly enjoyed working at. It was, I felt like a kid working at Toys R Us. I was in the store all the time buying, different gadgets and electronics and things, when they were first coming out to market and trying them. So I really enjoyed, that role. I love to travel, and, working at Carnival Cruise Lines and now Delta, and I get to fly around the world. And I absolutely love what I do. I love what my company does. So look at industries for things you have a passion for. And I'm into health and fitness. I'd love to retire from Delta, but if things don't work out and I go somewhere else, I'm looking at the health and fitness industry next as a potential career, because that's something I have a personal passion for. So I'll say, look at things you have a passion for, look at what you like to do, where you spend your money, industries that, interest you, excite you, and look there, and then that way, and then you can find a role, hopefully, that meets your needs, and also, meets the company has that opening within that industry.
That's fantastic advice. Thinking of where you're spending your money, what you're passionate about, those sort of things, because if you're spending money on something, obviously it's some sort of sustainable, or hopefully a sustainable business. But yeah, I talk to students about those things too. If they say, oh, I really love sports, and I say, okay, well, what teams do you like? Okay, maybe look on the website and see what kind of internship programs some of those sports teams have, or things like that. Or, oh, I really love clothing and retail. Okay, well, maybe some of those brands. Or I really care about the environment and combating climate change. Okay, what are some of the big research organizations or policymakers that are working on that? So it's always thinking through, what do you care about? What are you passionate about?
Exactly.
Yep. Elena,
what do you need us for? You're giving them great advice already.
Hey, they want to hear it from you all, though. That's great. Elena, what's your kind of thoughts? I forgot even the question that I posed before.
How do you figure out what you want to do?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question, and I definitely struggled with that in college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I originally started out as I wanted to be a psychiatrist, so I was taking like Chem 101, and I hated it. I didn't want to be in the lab. As soon as I got to the lab, I was like, nah, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And then I took Econ 101 my sophomore year, so I feel like I felt a little late to the game. You're not. And I took Professor Johnson's class, and obviously he's an amazing professor, but I fell in love with economics, and I just loved how it explained the world to me and how everything works, and you can apply it to almost any career. And I felt like it would prepare me well, because at that point I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I thought it would prepare me well for any career that I decided to choose. And I think that still stands today. I think economics is a great major to choose, especially if you're not really sure. And so, like I said, I originally wanted to go into public service, but like he said, I like money too. I wanted a career that would keep me above boat. I live in New York City. You need to make a good salary to live here. But at the same time, I didn't want to go into investment banking, which I think a lot of econ students kind of like direct themselves towards. That's not the only option in going into finance, being an econ major. There are many other industries that you can go into, and insurance being one of them, having an economics background. And we do almost everything that these investment bankers do, but we're not working the crazy hours, and we have a better work-life balance. I think one of the best parts about my job is meeting all these people and going to all these events, having client dinners, underwriters take you out to lunch. It's a big relationship building business. And I knew what I wanted in a job. I didn't know specifically what I wanted to do, but I knew what I wanted. I wanted to be at a big company. I wanted something that I was involved with people. I really like being around people and talking to people, having that kind of relationship management role of managing a client and managing a book of accounts. So that's kind of what I was looking for. And when I was interviewing for these broker roles, that's how it was explained to me from these interviewers. And I was like, yeah, this sounds right up my alley. And so that's kind of how I figured out what I wanted to do. But I was very nervous that I wasn't going to like it, because I had no idea what it was going to entail. But at the same time, I think what helps you out whenever you get to whatever job you land in is the people that you work with. I would say that's like the number one thing that will make or break whatever job you end up working on, is the people. Like, you need to have a great manager and great people that surround you, and you will enjoy whatever job you do, as long as you enjoy a little bit of like the actual work. But the people in my group just keep me at Aon. They're just so amazing. And I got very lucky with the group that I landed in. So when you're interviewing, take note of that. You also are interviewing those people. They're not just interviewing you. You need to like them as well. So it's just as important for you to want to work with them as it is for them to want to work with you.
Well said. Thanks, Elena. So I want to kind of stick with you for a second, because some folks in the chat are asking about majors. So, and Keith, you can chime in as well, but one student says, what are some of the common majors amongst your colleagues? And kind of this question too, another student asked, like, how important is major? Like, did that really influence your ability to get your role? I know, Keith, you went to pursued your MBA too, so we'll kind of pop over to you to talk about continuing education, but how important is major, or what are some of the other things besides major that maybe have made you competitive in the job market?
Yeah, definitely. So it's interesting. Not a lot of people in my group majored in risk management. It's a very niche major, I would say. For the brokers, it's great. It's if you have that experience, but you don't need to take a risk management course to get into the insurance industry. I would say majority of us are economics majors, actually, but that's not to say that that's all you need. We have finance majors, and we just hired a girl that was an art history major. So you don't have to have a kind of finance background to land in insurance. I think for us and what we look for, it's more so personality when we're interviewing them and how we think that they would be as brokers. So you could major in anything, I think, and still be able to sell yourself and the skills that you can present and what you've learned in your major to apply to that job. And yeah, I think, and what was the second part of the question?
So outside of, thanks, I'd ask you that question before to remind me of the question, so it's good. What are other things that students could focus on when they're in school to be competitive, kind of within your field or for your types of roles? Like outside of major, where should they be spending their time, and does GPA matter, extracurriculars, work experience?
Yeah, so I've actually been surprisingly very involved in our interviewing process for our group recently. And I think it's because my group likes to bring in the perspective of someone younger on the team, and there's also someone senior interviewing. So I've interviewed for our interns and then have also interviewed for some new associate brokers. And mainly when I look at a resume, I just kind of look at if they've had any internships, and not even that, if some people that I've interviewed, they've did their own business during COVID because maybe they didn't have an internship because it got canceled. And this one guy talked about how he created like a lawn mowing business with his friend over summer, and that was the intern that we hired actually. So seeing kind of like that motivation and that drive, I look for if people are involved in clubs. I personally like to look at that. If they've expanded their skill set a little further outside of just going to school and doing like the minimum of getting your major. And I mean, GPA, it matters, but honestly, I've noticed that we don't necessarily look at that. Like that's not the top thing that we're looking at. We're more so looking for experience, not just as an internship, but as a whole, involving yourself in extracurriculars, learning another language, stuff like that.
Great, thank you. Keith, how about folks that you've worked with? Or is there a lot of econ majors in the mix of the types of roles you've had? And then you obviously went and pursued your MBA. What kind of inspired that?
Yeah, you know, as far as majors, I work with people that have majored in pretty much everything. You know, knowing what I know now, if I knew about supply chain and logistics, I probably would have majored in that because I really enjoy it. But I don't even know if that was a major at the time when I was in school, and I know they have that now. A lot of people that I work with don't have that degree. There's English majors, there's finance majors, there's a few econ majors, there's engineering majors. There are people who went to law school, and so econ. I would say econ. Not that majors are not important; they are, and I think it's good to get your degree. Because a lot of companies still require that, or it's recommended that you have a degree in order to get a job. But I wouldn't worry about your majors, except that econ is great because everything relies on economy, supply and demand. So there's a lot of basics you can learn from that. I think that the skills are transferable to almost any role that you can do in a company, and so it is. I think it's important to get your degree. I'm glad I did economics because it was also a parallel path I think at the time, and I don't know if they still do it, but I could have either gone finance, investment and banking, or econ. And I think I chose econ because it was less, econ and getting a BA there because there's just some courses I didn't want to take or worry about. So that's why I chose that path. And it did help me because I was more well-rounded. And understood some of the basics, that helped me get, my first job as a financial analyst. But, there's people in all sorts of majors that, and I wouldn't focus on that right now. Just, study, get your degree, and again, make sure you're networking. As far as, what we look for, it's all about, what have you done to kind of set yourself apart from others? And it's about extracurricular activities. If you've done anything from entrepreneurship that shows an initiative, what are the results that you achieved if you were, part of a committee or a group and you had a leadership role, those type of things are important, that we look for in candidates that whether they're fresh out of college, or, have some experience. And, what is the impact or impression that you left behind? Those things are important. And, when it comes to interviewing, and I don't know if we're going to talk about that, but it's, practice interviewing. A lot of companies these days, they do what they call behavioral interviewing, where they ask you questions based on your experience. And if you may not have that exact experience they're asking for, but again, skills are transferable. So try to recall a time where you had, you displayed that, if you're looking for adaptability or change or leadership, or team building, those kind of things, results. Give me an example of when you produced a result. And so those things you can take from almost any experience and say, well, I don't have that exact experience, but here's what I've done in this situation. And so I would say, practice, communication skills, be confident in yourself. I always walk into an interview as if I always already have the job. When you're, LinkedIn, I think is a great resource. You can look at, there's jobs postings out there. So if you go start to look at job postings and read what their requirements are, you can kind of tailor your resume, to that job description. You can, even maybe take a course or get a certificate or do something extracurricular to get experience in that area, for a job. So I think LinkedIn is a great resource. And again, if you don't have a profile out there right now, create a profile, start to, network with people, look for jobs and read those job descriptions. And, at the time when I got my MBA, MBAs were really used to distinguish and people in roles, and they were certain jobs, especially in marketing and finance, they wanted people that had an MBA was required. But it got to the point everybody was getting an MBA. And so those aren't really required anymore unless you're in certain areas, certain fields. I think some marketing at some companies, especially if they're retailers, they require you to have an MBA or a master's in marketing or a similar role. But I don't think it's as relevant anymore just because so many people have it. So it's really more about, if you get your degree, focus on practicing, interviewing skills, communication skills, doing things that, will set yourself apart, from, the other candidates, the other students, I think will be, more beneficial to you. And if you really have a desire to go back and get additional education, there's nothing wrong with getting an MBA. It's not going to hurt you. But from my experience, companies don't necessarily require it as much as they used to. They look more for a job experience. Again, and hopefully if you get an interview, the impression that you leave, in that situation. But again, won't hurt you if it's something you desire to do and continue your education. But I don't think as needed today as it was in the past.
Great. That was really, really superb perspective, I think, from both of you, of that idea of showing motivation and drive and showing initiative and to kind of set yourself apart, right? So it doesn't have to be that you're, the president of a student organization necessarily, but if you're working as a server, how do you kind of go above and beyond? What are some of the metrics or results of, the sales that you do, or have you trained other staff members or things like that? So I think that's something that students sometimes struggle with because they say, oh, I was just a server. I'm part of the student org. And it's like having to kind of think through, no, you what is it that you accomplished? Even if it's small little things, that's what's going to kind of showcase your skills, showcase your drive, your motivation, all of those things. So I had a question for Elena. Annabelle asked, did you find transitioning to your new role difficult? What type of support was there once you landed a new job? So I wanted Elena to kind of not exactly answer that question, but talk about, I guess, as she's transitioned and had this like recent new job or changing to a new job, what did that transition look like? And then also when you started in your role after graduation, like what did that onboarding process look like? Did they expect you to know everything? Because that's a common fear that I hear students worried about.
Yeah, definitely a valid question. And especially in my role, I didn't even know what a broker meant. Like when I applied for the role, right? And I tried to look on Google and understand it a little more, but there was only so much it could tell me. So I didn't know anything about the role that I am in now when I started. And I'm not in one of those rotational programs, which I know is very attractive to a lot of young grads because they can kind of try out a few different things, and Aon doesn't have that. So I was in the property department specifically. But when I started, you have to get licensed in the state of New York to be a broker for insurance. So I had to take a 3-week course, which was outside of Aon, and it just basically taught me the bare minimum basics of property and casualty insurance. I even learned about like homeowners insurance. And a lot of the stuff from the course I don't necessarily use in my job every day, but it was a very bare bones certificate that I had to get. So I did that course right away when I started, and then I had to pass the exam. And so but that was good timing because I just graduated. So I was pretty used to studying a lot. So I just did the same thing again for 3 weeks. And then once you're licensed, then you are able to interact with clients and underwriters and do the negotiating. And so I was an associate broker when I started, and now I'm a broker. So it's just the difference between my roles and the titles. But when I started as an associate, it was my role to support the brokers and the senior brokers on their accounts. So I was mainly there to do like invoicing. So you like build a client. I created PowerPoint decks. We do like renewal strategies where we kind of get together as a group of brokers, kind of think about how we're gonna go through the client's renewal the next year, because we work on a renewal basis. The accounts renew once a year, and then your insurance is in place for an entire year. And all the clients renew in different months and dates of the year. So we're constantly working with our clients. And so my role was purely supportive when I first started, and they didn't expect me to know anything about insurance. They were just happy for me to be there and to learn. And how I learned is I literally just sat in on every call that I was invited to. I took notes in every call. If I didn't understand a word, I would write it down and then look it up later, or talk to a broker and be like, hey, what did you mean by that when we were in that call? So I mainly just learned by absorbing and being around everyone. There was no formal course for me. And once I kind of got my bearings of being there for about 3 months is when I kind of got thrown into my first account. And a lot of it was trial by fire, which sounds a little scary. But I honestly think that's one of the best ways to learn, is by doing it yourself. Obviously, I always had support there the whole time. And the best part about my group is they were like, no matter what, if anything happens, it's going to fall on the senior broker. It'll never fall on you. So I always knew that the responsibility was off my shoulders, because I was nervous. I mean, you're doing like a corporate job. You're dealing with real money and real people's budgets. And as a recent college grad, I was like, how am I doing this? You can't put the responsibility on me. But at the end of the day, it wasn't my responsibility. It was always the senior broker was going to step in. But my group was really great at giving me responsibility and exposing me to clients from day one. So I was going to client meetings as soon as I was licensed. So I could just start absorbing the process, absorbing how they did things. And then I just picked up on things pretty quickly and got very interested and involved in a lot of my accounts. And after you do these things, I didn't know this when I got a job, you have annual reviews. So you'll sit down with your manager after about a year of being at your job, just kind of talk about how the last year went, what you can improve on, what you did well, and then they'll talk about your salary too in that time. And so that was an experience for me that I didn't know was going to happen. But in that review, I was kind of like, so when do you think I can get promoted? What's the timeline? And typically they said it was about 2 to 3 years of being at Aon in our group. That is when you get promoted. So I kind of got to set expectations then. I was like, I want to get there. How can I get there? What more do I need to do to get promoted? What accounts do I need to work on? What do I need to work on myself? And I established a very good relationship with my manager. And we had very open communication on how I can get there. And then from then, I just kept learning more and more in each account that I did. And then, I was recently promoted a few months ago. And so transitioning from being an associate broker to being a broker, it was pretty smooth because I'm still on all the same accounts that I was before, maybe even a few less, because now I'm taking a bigger role on my accounts. But I already know the clients, I already know the underwriters, and I'm just stepping up with my responsibilities. So it was pretty smooth, I would say. But I recently went through, because like I said, we work on a renewal basis. I had an 11-1, so that the insurance bound yesterday. And that was the first one that I did everything start to finish myself. But I think everything the past 2 years that my team has helped support me, I've been able to have those skills to be able to do that. So I guess I would bring it back to the people that you surround yourself with at your job, and especially with my relationship with my manager. I think that was key to having people that you create that relationship with that will back you up and kind of put you in that position for that promotion. It was him that kind of said, I think Elena's ready to do this. And then the senior people were like, okay, we trust your opinion. So it's very good to have a good manager to have your back in those situations.
Yeah, if I could, great job, Elena. You said something very important, I think, for people to hear is that very few jobs expect you to know everything coming into it, especially coming out of college. Even while into my career, I went from finance to HR, from HR back to finance, and then to IT, and then from IT to supply chain. In those first few roles, they did not expect me to know everything. Now, later in my career, now that I've been in a director and VP role, yeah, I'm expected to know and have some experience. But those entry-level roles or even those secondary roles, they did not expect me to know everything. If you're eager to learn, you've got the aptitude to learn, that's what's most important. And, you know, Elena makes a great point of that. And obviously she's done well in her career in the couple of years that she's been working.
Those are great additions and just perspectives on your all's journey. So thanks. We're kind of nearing the end of our time here, but there's kind of two overarching questions that I wanted to pose to you both. So we'll start with Keith. I guess, what overall advice would you give to students regarding the job and internship search process from your own successes and mistakes? What's the wisdom you want to impart?
You know, I think I've mentioned it before. It's just, I think networking. Networking has been so key to my career. It's been the most successful thing that has helped me to get to where I am today. Every job except for the last two I've gotten through networking. And then the last two were because of the profile and resume I built up on LinkedIn that, you know, those recruiters reached out to me. And don't be afraid to try something. You know, I saw a couple of questions about how do I know if I don't know my passions or I'm undecided. You know, how do I know what to do? Well, try. You know, you don't know until you try. So pick something that you may have an interest in, or you think you may have an interest in, whether it's a degree or a job, and try it. And, you know, at this point, you know, especially if you get an internship in it, I think that's the best case scenario, because that's like trying before you buy. And so get an internship in something and then try it. And if you don't like it, you can change. Don't be afraid to switch. I've known a lot of people through my career that have gotten trapped in jobs that they don't like, and they're not happy. And just know that you can change. You know, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of jobs out there right now. Yeah, there are a lot of people looking for jobs. I think right now there's more jobs than people. So the demand is higher than the supply. I learned that from Econ. So, and you know, the degree is important. You know, it will help you in whatever you choose to do, and you can choose to do something that may not be related to the degree, but you will still find success and be successful. But I would say just don't worry about it. Just try different things until you find that thing that you really like and you're good at. I've done different things in my career. I've been in, you know, I said 4 different business units. I've taken lateral jobs just to learn something new before moving, you know, getting promoted and moving ahead. So, you know, and please, you know, if you would like to reach out and connect with me, don't be hesitant about doing that. You know, get a mentor, you know, whoever that may be, and work with that person to ask questions. And like I said, that's how I got my first job. I was through my mentor, and they said, go talk to this person. And it's been, you know, a great success ever since.
Beautiful advice. I love it. Elena, what's some of your parting words of wisdom? And then if you could add in a little bit about any interview advice you have, or what interviewing looks like for your types of roles at your firm.
Yeah, definitely. I would say my biggest advice when you're looking for jobs and internships is just cast a wide net. And because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, I think the main thing that helped me the most was going on the ESA career trips. And I'm not just saying that because I was the career trip chairperson, like when I was in college, but I promise you, it was the best experience of my life when I was a sophomore, because it opened my eyes to so many different things that I could do with my econ major. I could go into law, I could go into private equity, I could go into insurance, I could go into the public sector. There's so many things you can do, and you're not learning that in your classes necessarily. So being able to take what you're learning in your classes and apply it to meeting these people who have these jobs in real life in New York City, in Chicago, wherever you want to get a job, was extremely helpful for me. And that's kind of what sparked my interest. Like, I want to be in New York City. So at least I figured that out, and then I could try and find jobs there. So use the resources that Wisconsin has to offer. They have an amazing amount of resources for you guys, down to the flyers in your office. That's how I found my first internship. You will find something. Yeah, don't worry, it'll all work out. And like Keith said, you can constantly move your career. You're not locked in to where you're at. My only advice would be, if you get a job out of college and you don't really like it, stay there for at least a year, get a year under your belt, and then try and look for something new. Hopefully through someone that you've met at that job and through connections that you've made. And that way the interview process will go a lot smoother. I know people that don't even have to interview for these jobs because they've been best friends for 10 years and they just, oh yeah, I know that guy, we can hire him. And I just like hearing that in college, I was like, how is that possible? How am I supposed to meet people like that? But it happens when you get into the industry of whatever you do, and make those relationships. So yeah, I would say use the resources at Madison. Networking is huge. Keep the relationships too. I'm still talking to people at Swiss Re. I catch up with them every once in a while because who knows what I want to do in a few years. So it's good to keep those relationships intact. And then with regards to interviewing, just kind of like my advice in general, or like about.
Yeah, I guess, or if you could briefly kind of, I know this is kind of backtracking a bit on one of the previous topics, but a lot of times students are wanting to know, how do they prepare for interviews or what to expect? Is there any like certain things that kind of threw you for a loop when you were interviewing for internships, or your current role?
Yeah, so when I interviewed for Swiss Re, it was pretty, I would say vanilla. I just had like a one phone call with the group and then another phone call with HR. But when I was interviewing for the job after I finished my internship, that one was a little more stressful. It was one of those super days where you had to do like a role play with someone. And then I also had to do a presentation. And then I also had to do kind of like a math thing. But I feel like that's not as typical, I would say. Yeah, and when I went into that, I did a lot of preparation, but I honestly don't think any of that preparation really helped. The reason why they do that is not necessarily to see if you can get the answer right, but to see how you act in those situations, see how you hold yourself under stressful events, how you can present with only giving information for 15 minutes. So it's not about the right answer at all. You could get the math problem totally wrong, but they want to see how you explain it and how you present yourself. But yeah, they're not that typical, to be honest. And I remember being very stressed when I was interviewing that I was going to get all these technical questions. That never happened. And at Aon, when I interviewed for the job, I had one interview with this guy, Rick Miller, who leads the entire US, which I didn't even know that was him when I talked to him. And that was actually the interview that I was least prepared for because he ended up calling me out of the blue and the HR coordinator messed up and I didn't know the time that I was supposed to have the interview. So, and I was preparing for each interview. I wrote out a page of notes for whatever job I was doing. So that's just who I am. I wanted to be prepared, and Aon was the one that I was the least prepared for, and that's the one where I am today. And I loved talking to the guy, Rick. He was great. We got along great. It was a very just casual conversation. I think he just wanted to feel out my personality, what I was doing at Wisconsin. And then I ended up getting the job because I had another offer at another company. And that's advice I would also give you. So I was interviewing at Aon. I really wanted to work for Aon. I got an offer from another brokerage firm. I didn't really want to work for them. So I used that to my advantage to the recruiter that I was working with at Aon. And I told him, hey, because I hadn't heard from them for a few weeks. It's like, hey, I have this other offer right now. Like I need to let them know by Friday. I would love to work for Aon. So please let me know like how things are panning out. And the reason for this delay of like these 2 weeks, now that I'm on the other side, it's just things are slow here. You just have to refer them up to people. HR has to check off. People are busy. So it's never like a personal thing if people aren't getting back to you. It's just people are busy. And that's why there's delays most of the time. And then, yeah, so I used that to my advantage, and Aon responded the next day. They go, yeah, here's your offer. And because we want to give you an offer, we just were like a little delayed on it. And so now when I do interviews for a group, it's the same kind of thing when I was first interviewed. It's very, very generic. I just want to get to know your personality. I want you to explain your experiences to me and what you've done in your clubs, if you've gone above and beyond, or what you're interested in and why you're interested in Aon, and how you've gotten to be interested in the insurance industry. So I would say know a little bit about the company that you're interviewing for. You don't need to know all the facts about us, but it's good to do a little research before. But just, yeah, relax a little bit, I would say, because I think it's more casual than you think. And like I said before, you're also interviewing them. So it's just as important for you to ask them questions that would benefit you. Because this is something that you could be in for a year or two when you're interviewing for jobs. So you want to make sure that you like it and you ask the right questions.
Amazing advice. Thank you both so much. I just want to, again, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules and families and everything like that, for sharing your wisdom, your tips, your tricks, your trials and tribulations with our students. We really, really appreciate it. And for our students, I'm going to put the link to our Econ Career Development Office in the chat, because on that main landing page, there's a link to schedule a career advising appointment. There's a link to the rest of the career chat series. So we have 3 more. This is the first out of 4 series. So for those of you that maybe are kind of unsure about, what do I want to do? What kind of careers are out there for econ majors, or just generally, feel free to join us for some of our other career chat series coming up. We'd love to see you there and have you continue to learn from the wisdom of our awesome alums. So thank you both so much, and have an amazing night.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. I really
Thank you,
appreciate it. A
everyone.
great time. And like I said, don't hesitate to reach out if you all have any questions, need anything. And just a side note for Elena, Aon is a supplier to Delta. We do buy your insurance.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
nice. I know, I was trying to think. I don't know if you guys are a client of ours. Maybe you guys are probably out of our Atlanta office, I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
exactly.
That those
Yeah.
are the brokers that you work with. But yeah, yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised.
Exactly.
Aon does we're the broker for a lot of companies. So it's fun facts always whenever like AMC is one of our clients. And like if I go to see a movie, I'm like, yeah, I know the value of this property because we place the insurance. But yeah, that's funny. No, definitely, please reach out. I love to stay connected with Wisconsin students and spread our knowledge.
Exactly. Same here. Take care.